So a sad story ends up with a better ending. We'll talk about that tonight and a whole lot more. Welcome in. It is great to have you aboard on My State of Mind. My name is Dan Yorke, and we have a lot going on here tonight. David Bizarre, our local attorney, who has done a yeoman's piece of work helping a local family get through a bit of turmoil. The story of George Holland Jr. will finally be laid to rest in totality this week. He's my guest following up from last week's visit and a court appearance this week, yesterday actually, that turned out better. And there's some morals to the story and some interesting parts of the law that are worthy of discussion. So we'll get to that a little bit later on in the broadcast when we have our guest segment. But for now, let us check the world and the nation in our own backyard, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. No doubt they are, fresh off the Olympics. These numbers can't be worse. It really is a temperature on the people of Rhode Island and how we feel about leadership. Scary, scary. We'll delve into them. And we finally found the Attorney General. Yeah, he's actually, he did an interview this morning on 38 Studios, no less. A little late. You better plan for the weekend. It's going to be a little tough downtown, and lots of good things happening at Rhode Island College athletically. We'll mention that before we're done with the rundown. Let's go to the Russian story. This is, we haven't touched on some of the international events since the Olympics on the broadcast, but how can you ignore the headlines here? The Secretary of State suggesting that Russia return those troops to the barracks. Fox News has this report, and then we'll talk about it a bit.
Secretary of State John Kerry in Kiev to meet with members of the new government.
The United States reaffirms our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity according to international law.
The White House pledging support for Ukraine shortly after the secretary's arrival. The administration working with Congress and the Ukrainian government to provide $1 billion in loan guarantees.
It provides immediate technical expertise to Ukraine to repair its economy, and importantly, it provides for assistance to help Ukraine plan for elections that are going to be coming up very soon.
Russian President Vladimir Putin also commenting on the situation in Ukraine, saying the parliament is partially legitimate, but the acting president is not. He still considers fugitive President Viktor Yanukovych the leader of the country.
There is only one assessment that can be made, and that this was an unconstitutional coup and armed seizure of power.
Those comments coming as warning shots were fired at an airbase in Crimea. Russian soldiers shooting into the air as unarmed Ukrainian troops marched toward them. Despite that tense moment, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he does not want to go to war with Ukraine. In Kiev, Amy Kellogg, Fox News.
You better not. The world was just feeling really good about Russia after the Olympics, right? Sochi did a lot. I mean, there's a reason why he spent $51 billion on an Olympic Games. And that could all go down the turlet, so to speak, with any more military action here. I think America is playing it right. You may say one thing or the other about the Obama administration's relationship with Putin and Russia, but cozying up financially to Ukraine and trying to help them do their thing as they want to rid themselves of Russian intervention and their former president seems to be the right thing to do. This is not going to come to blows between anybody of any serious nature. And I'm guessing that Putin will walk away slowly, but surely, not right away. We'll keep tabs on that. That's just my guess. I mean, I know as much as you do on this, but it seems to me that there's more drama than worry about war here. Move on. Let's go to the local scene and see what's happening here. This could not be worse. Holy moly. Here's a headline. Public opinion of elected leaders low. Low? This is the Hassenfeld Leadership Project, at Bryant University. Gary Sass is the guy to put these numbers together, and he's going to be here on Monday of next week to talk about these numbers. But let's run through them real quick. Very, very interesting. This is how people view the leadership effectiveness of state officials. The people who run for state office, state reps, state senators, that kind of thing. 82% fair or poor, and 43% just plain poor. That's the composite of the 438 registered voters that responded to the poll. Same pollster that Channel 12 uses, by the way, Joe Fleming. And only 12% thought that they were any good at problem solving. 85% say they're not very good at problem solving. Next slate. Laura put these together. They look really good. Now, you feel better about your local officials you know, you think that, yeah, 45% of those polls said, yeah, my mayor, my council, my school committee do a pretty good job. And the conflict management situation is, you know, okay. But then you get back to the state officials and you break it down by party and you see some real, look, Republican voters just hate everything. I mean, 98%, you know, were in the fair or poor category for effectiveness, you know, 86% fair or poor category for fiscal management, and 91% don't think that there's any integrity in the state leadership. Frankly, though, if you look at the Democratic voters, which is the big party here, those numbers aren't very, they're not good either. So what does it all tell us? It tells us that we're either, I'm going to use one or two words, and maybe you want to kick back to me on your state of mind or on the radio tomorrow, noon to 3, because we had a good conversation about this on WPRO today. We're either ashamed or embarrassed. But those numbers are a whole lot more about us than they are about leadership, because when we feel that bad about the people that we put into lead, we need to look inward. We need to look in the mirror. We've got to do something about this. I'm not exactly sure what. We'll talk to Gary Sass about it on Monday of next week. But those are dismal reflections on how we feel about the people we put into office to lead us. You got to remember, we are the boss, the people, we the people. Hey, we found him. Yes, this is the Attorney General. He's been hiding out in downtown Providence somewhere. There he is. He does go out and speak every once in a while. Sometimes he ends up in Florida, gets all jammed up down there because people think he lives there. Nice enough guy, Peter Kilmartin. But here's something that I thought was really interesting. He's responding to this bit of audio, which came from Newsmakers with Tim and Ted on Channel 12 this past weekend, where they asked the U.S. Attorney, not the AG, but the U.S. Attorney, Pino Neronha, about where he fits in the 38 Studios investigation.
What we did was we looked very narrowly and very carefully at whether there were any violations of federal law, had there been bank fraud committed. Again, as I think I was on just as this was breaking, Tim, I wanted to move very quickly to see whether there were those potential crimes. If there were, we were going to move quickly. If there wasn't, then we were going to finish up and get out. And that's what we've done.
As I said last night, I'm disappointed that the U.S. Attorney is not pursuing the 38 Studios investigation, but I get what the territorial arguments are, and he doesn't believe that his prosecutorial nose belongs there. I get that. Well, this morning, Gene Valicente on the WPRO Morning News on the radio actually had a conversation with Peter Kilmartin about this, and Peter was beginning to get all defensive about his track record, and listen to this.
I've always said we utilize this office without fear, ill will, and that's what we do. We do the job, we do it well, and I also have a responsibility. When there are those who may or may not be accused, I have a responsibility to the court and an ethical responsibility not to comment on those things and prejudice the case. And that's a responsibility the sitting AG has. It's my responsibility, and I take it seriously.
Please. You know what you take seriously? Being part of the Old Boy Network. You were like that when you were a legislator, Peter, and you're like that as the Attorney General. The idea that you have stood by, said mostly nothing about the 38 Studios debacle, have said nothing about the legislature policing itself, have said nothing about the embarrassment and the worry that you have about whether or not this ought to be legal. Look, the state police have admitted they've got an investigation going, and they're the law enforcement arm for the Attorney General, but he's been under a desk, and it's only because there's a Republican, Dawson Hodgson, who's running against him now and calling him out, that he's crawling out from under that desk. I mean, it's as transparent as the day is long. He's got no track record. This will be a heck of a race in 2014. Peter, you can come here and dispute my thoughts on this anytime you want. I'll bring the milk. All right, let us move on here. You're warned. You're warned. Did you see this in the paper today? I thought, oh my gosh, ramping up congestion. There's a big viaduct, 95 viaduct project going on in downtown Providence. I mean, this work's got to be done, and I got to give the DOT credit because they're doing this from 1 a.m. Saturday, that's Saturday morning, that's Friday night, Saturday morning, to 5 a.m. Tuesday. So figure on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Laura, throw that back up, will you? Because we got these great pictures. I'm reminding you, this is the exit, 22 CBA. A goes downtown, B goes to the 610 connector, and C goes to the mall. Monday morning of next week, if you drive into that mess, 146, 95 merge, everyone backed up, You're an idiot. Figure it out. Don't do it. And get out of my way, because I'm coming about an hour later. I get in on 9. Banker's hours, sort of. And finally, congratulations at Rhode Island College. Did I call anybody an idiot? That was not right. You know I love you, but if you drive into that, I'll be you idiots. Sorry. This is very nice. RIC championships for the first time in whatever, I guess. Both the men and women's basketball teams won their respective Little East championships. I went to the Eastern Connecticut game. Bob Walsh, the head coach, friend of mine, and my partner on radio broadcast for the high school tournaments. We're doing 10 games this year. I'll tell you more about that later in the week. But Bob took his team to the 6th Little East title in 8 years. It's the 8th time he's brought his team, 8 straight year in a row, he's brought his team to the Division III NCAA tournaments. What he's still doing coaching Division III level, which is not anything to be embarrassed over, is beyond my wildest understanding. But his cohort, Kara Williamson, his peer, who's just a 30-year-old new coach at RIC for the last couple of years, also won the Little East Championship. So they're moving on to the NCAA tournaments. Very nice. Roger Williams also made the women's Division III. They need to get some attention. Bob and his RIC men's team play Yorke College, of all places, Thursday night at home at RIC. Kara takes her women's team on the road to God knows where. But Hannaford College? But congratulations, Rhode Island College, getting it done. When we come back, the final chapter on a very tough story and some real good legal work. Stay with us. Welcome back in. Here was the headline that is the most recent. Thank goodness. I mean, it's just a thank goodness. It's as simple as that on PRI.com. And here's the story that Susan Campbell filed from yesterday's court effort. Then we'll meet our guest.
It's been a month since George Holland Jr. was shot to death, and now the battle over the boy's body is over.
We always felt that he should be with his dad, as much as he loved his dad, and now the two of them can rest together. We're very happy.
Leah Seaton is George's aunt. She became his legal guardian after the boy's mother, Shana Rufo, was convicted of killing his father. On the day of George's funeral, a key funeral employee told Seaton they couldn't bury George because his mother wanted his remains to be cremated. There was a lot of back and forth, but today at a hearing, Rufo changed her mind and agreed to allow her son to be buried next to his father.
It's been a month, and this has to come to an end. My son needs to rest.
As a part of the agreement, Key Funeral Home will also provide a burial plot for George's mother. Her sister, Gina Bly, says that offer sealed the deal.
Georgie always said that he wanted to be with her forever. So when they offered to buy the plot next to it, that's what kind of changed her mind of having him buried there.
The stipulation also requires Leah Seaton to give several of George's belongings, including his football jersey, to Gina Bly and Shana Rufo. Leah Seaton tells me George will be buried as soon as possible. In the newsroom, Susan Campbell, Eyewitness News.
It's hard to celebrate this because it's just so tragic, David, but you were instrumental in bringing this whole thing to a head. We talked last week. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
We talked last week about how you came into this. Let's not waste any time. There's a archive at WPR.com. You can see our previous shows and find out how this all happened. Pretty riveting moment, I think, in the court yesterday when the judge gave Shana Rufo, the mom of George Holland Jr., a couple of hours to talk things over with her sister. I wouldn't say unprecedented, but unusual.
It actually is very unusual. Before that happened, the attorney, Joe Rahib, for the funeral home, and I went down to talk to Shana Rufo, the mom, to see if we could work out an agreement before it was in the judge's hands. And she asked if she could speak to her sister after we explained to her the terms of what we might be able to agree to. The sheriff said, no, that never happens. So it's highly unusual. The sheriffs didn't think it could happen, and we talked to the sheriffs, and they said the only way it can happen is if the judge agrees to it. And when we're in the courtroom, the judge turned to the sheriff to talk to him about how that might happen, and they worked a way out to do that.
Yeah, I think there was real judicial temperament on the part of the judge, who really didn't try a case, but who, took a week to make sure that the funeral home had its proper legal representation, read your excellently written briefs, comported himself, I think, with a seriousness, but compassion, let the sisters talk it over, and the end result was we didn't have a trial over the remains. We had a solution.
We did. The judge was ready for a trial. I was ready for a trial, and the case was comported for the trial to go forward, but you're 100% right. The judge looked at the facts of the case, he looked at the issues, and he handled it with extreme care. He didn't push anybody. Even when I asked the judge to see if Shana Rufo would agree to the stipulation of facts, which would have reduced some of the testimony that would have been necessary, he was very careful how we went through that with her, so he did comport himself in a very good manner.
All right, so when we come back, we'll talk about if there's a moral to this, or some of the legal issues that are involved in this are very interesting. And sometimes it's nice to see the courts actually work it out the right way. Not that it doesn't happen often, but the way that this could have gone bad. Stay with us. There's attorney David Bazar a couple of weeks ago, and of course there's George Holland Jr., who's really at the core of this whole story. He will be laid to rest sometime this week, I believe. I have actually not yet had a chance to talk to the family about when that will happen, but I'm sure they'll handle it on their own time, and it'd be nice for everybody to kind of come together. Yes?
Yes, they will, and they were still discussing the terms with the funeral home director as they were walking out of court. Nothing had been resolved as of yesterday. You
had done, when it comes to the custody of a minor and the unusual and tragic circumstance of having the minor having passed, there really wasn't the law that the funeral home thought was in place necessarily. At least your research and your arguments pointed to that custody is something that really is a judicial decision, at least right now, without explicit statute, correct?
It can be. So the long and short of that is there's a statute that gives what I call a safe harbor to the funeral home and the funeral home director. When they deal with people, there's a priority or an order of people that they can talk to. And in this case, the mom would have fallen next in line on that statute. But there's a case from 1974, Sullivan versus Catholic Cemeteries, where the Supreme Court had laid out pretty much that same order of priority, but said that the final decision can be in the equitable jurisdiction of the court to determine who is the person most appropriate to make the decision based on the circumstance of the case.
You're all attorneys, to a certain extent, are legal scholars. But you really are one, and you threw yourself on a volunteer basis into this thing and wrote a brief that I thought was really very high level. There's probably a part of you just on the sports side of being an attorney. You didn't get to try your brief, but you ought to keep it somewhere. Send it down to Roger Williams or somewhere at law school so they can take a look at how to make a good argument. It was pretty good.
Thank you. And so I have to give credit to Lauren Jones, who worked with me on that. He did a lot of the research and helped put the brief together, did a lot of the work. We went back and forth with about 4 or 5 drafts on that, and he was incredible.
Well, you could teach a class on this one. You also mentioned to me on the radio that, at one point you were up or being considered for a family court judgeship, and there's some kind of moral to the story you feel about the way this whole thing kind of rolled out.
So when I had interviewed with the JNC and then the governor at one point in time, I'm actually had been on 3 lists, and they're all filled now, so it's history. But
well, there's always openings, but anyway.
We'll see.
Yeah.
The interesting part was that I said in family court, the parties are already at odds. It's already a very difficult situation, and the adversarial nature of the court system makes it worse, so that you have to have a little bit of a mediator in you in order to resolve cases. And that's a skill that I tried to bring to bear on this case when we went down to talk to Shana Rufo to try to reach a settlement.
Yeah, well, it was incredibly effective. What's the moral of the story for you as somebody who came into this really in a triage role as an attorney, responded to my request, somebody please help. Couldn't have worked out any better for the family amidst the tragedy of the life lost. what do you come away with?
This is what I have. You put me in touch with a great family. Leah Seaton did a great job with that boy while he was alive. She is a great person. I really enjoyed working with her, and what we were able to do was to take a story that was layered with tragedy, one layer of tragedy after another, and come to the right answer. It really wasn't about winning or losing, it was getting to the right answer for that young man.
So he shall be laid to rest, and the family then can actually begin the mourning process, because the psychology of this, when you're so busy trying to fight this thing, you really never get a chance to do what you got to do.
They'll get a chance to step back and do that now, and they'll have a place to go remember him.
Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you for putting me in touch with them.
You know, and you know, I don't do commercials for lawyers.
Thanks.
David Bizarre. When we come back, your state of mind. Stay with us. No, I got to reiterate. Easy for me to say, silly wabbit. You know, Attorney David Bizarre, who I had never met, other than when he tapped me on the shoulder at a URI basketball game where I do the public address and said, I can help those people. You know, some attorneys do incredible work, whether they're paid, $500 an hour or pro bono. In this particular case, the pro bono work was worth $500 an hour plus. So make a note of that. I'm so happy that this thing resolved the way it did. Your state of mind. You can react to this show or anything that we say here anytime. 228-1886. State of mind at myritv.com is the email, and you can tweet and Facebook post at Dan Yorke Show. Here's an interesting voicemail we just got on the line.
When are you going to have Buddy Santee on your show? I'm dying to see him because I know he's been sick, but I heard he's getting better, and I would like to see him on your show someday. And I want to hear him announce that he's going to run for mayor.
Well, I'd be happy to have Buddy on the show. He follows me on the radio. He's got his own TV show, but if he wants to announce he's actually running for mayor, I should let him know. Thanks, Bernie. I'll see you tomorrow on the radio at noon and on MyRITV tomorrow night at 7:30.